First, I need to make sure we're on the same page. Before I start, I want you to know that I'm talking about Benatarian antinatalism. I'm not talking about any other type of antinatalism. Not Les Knight's antinatalism, which is based on environmental concerns. I'm only concerned with the asymmetry argument and pointing out why it's illogical. And because it's illogical, it means that things are much worse than antinatalists, Benatarian antinatalists, realize. First, I need to explain the asymmetry argument. The asymmetry argument says that life is bad. Coming into existence is always a harm. Being born is always bad, no matter what life you have. Sure, there are variations of life. There's multitudes of different lifestyles and the way people live, or animals live as well. Benatar, I should say, side note, did also say that this would ideally include animals as well. So coming into existence for any sentient being is a harm. And so he says it is better to not be born. It is better to never have been. So he does not distinguish between your life or my life. So to summarize this, I say that he's basically saying that life itself is to be avoided. It's best to not be born no matter what you are. Just there's non-existence and then there's existence. Or we could say that there is consciousness and then there's a lack of consciousness. Now, this is how he sees things. Something else that I should point out is he says once we are alive, we have a vested interest in staying alive. So we shouldn't conclude that it would be good to end one's, to S yourself. To K yourself, I should say, actually. So it's just, there is, in his view, there is zero, and then it is always wrong to add one. So zero is best, one is bad. Zeros and ones here. So you could see it as, everyone is just you, or everyone is antinatalists. And so if you weren't born, but someone else was born, or you were born as someone else, that would not be good either. So that isn't preferable. That would, if you weren't born, but you were born as somebody else, but it wasn't you, instead of this life, say it were some other life, then that would spoil his asymmetry argument. That would ruin it. Because if experience is inescapable, then that makes the asymmetry argument useless as far as using it for a basis for antinatalism. And this is called Benatarian antinatalism. It's based on the asymmetry argument. But what I'm going to assert, what I'm saying, what I conclude if naturalism is true, if there are no supernatural afterlives or supernatural before lives, if we didn't come here from somewhere else, another dimension or something, like if we didn't exist before we were born in some other state, and if after we die we completely cease to exist. Now, this is the naturalistic worldview, that brains are responsible for consciousness, and there are no supernatural afterlives. We don't have souls. There's no such thing as souls. There's no heaven or hell. There's no gods or devils or spirits or anything like that. If this is the worldview, which David Benatar, from every single thing I've found on him, he seems to be a naturalistic atheist, the type of atheist that Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris or Daniel Dennett or Christopher Hitchens was, then that's the naturalistic worldview. So we can do away with before lives and afterlives. So if this is true, then now I'm going to explain what's referred to as generic subjective continuity. This is a term that was coined by naturalistic philosopher Thomas Clark in his essay, Death, Nothingness, and Subjectivity, which you can find on naturalism.org. Sam Harris actually did a short podcast episode, Making Sense podcast episode on this essay. So it appears from everything that I've can surmise that Sam Harris actually subscribes to generic subjective continuity, Annaka Harris as well. The thing is, Annaka Harris may be a panpsychist, but generic subjective continuity would still apply even in that worldview. And actually, it would still apply in any worldview, as long as there is a complete cessation of the individual. So if a Christian is an annihilationist, if they believe that after someone goes to hell, that individual eventually is completely annihilated, then upon annihilation, that is where generic subjective continuity would take place. And so now I'm going to explain what generic subjective continuity is. So, first, let's start with a thought experiment. Imagine a completely empty universe. There's just a black void. It's just, and there's no one experiencing this black void. There is no black void for anyone. Anyways, completely empty universe, there's no consciousness, and then suddenly consciousness begins. There is this onset of awareness. And so now you might be thinking, so imagine suddenly there's awareness. You can imagine that it is you. And maybe you watch as a star is born or planets are forming or something. And so there is this witnessing of existence. There is awareness as opposed to no awareness. Now, what difference would it make if that brain that began doing awareness was the brain that's listening to this audio right now, or it was some other brain. As far as there being conscious experience, subjective conscious experience, as far as there being experience, what difference does it make which brain is doing it? It's almost like if you imagine if a single light, a single star starts emitting light, so there is light. What difference does it make which star comes to exist as far as there being light? So I'm saying, as far as there being conscious awareness as opposed to nothingness, it doesn't really matter which brain is doing it. It doesn't matter if it's the brain that's listening to this audio right now, or if it is some other brain that begins to do this awareness. There is awareness. There is no lack of it. There is no, just because this brain may not be you, there is no you to impede or block that experience from being experienced. It would be just as imposed as your experience was imposed on you upon birth, or whenever consciousness actually begins. So it would be just as imposed as that. If you didn't exist, if you weren't born in this scenario, as far as there being experience, there's no you to stop that experience from being imposed. So if it were not the consciousness that is being done by the brain that's listening to this audio right now, that ended, let's say there was nothingness, that ended that nothingness, then the consciousness that some other brain started doing would be the one to end that nothingness, that lack of consciousness. So now, imagine, let's move on to the next thought experiment. Imagine that you and one other being are the only two that exist in the entire universe. So eventually you die, and there's only this other being. So there is a brain, and it's doing consciousness, but there's no you anymore. So what of you would exist to stop that other experience from being the experience that came after your death? When I say after, I'm not literally saying you went into that other body. It's just a simple matter of there being, their existing experience after you cease to exist. So you cease to exist, but yes, there is experience after you died. And it's being done by the other brain that still exists. There's no you in a black void, or in peaceful oblivion, or in nothingness, or any of that eternal nothingness or peaceful oblivion. No, there is experience. It's just that it's in some other context rather than there being nothingness. So let's go back to the first thought experiment. It's a simple matter of there being experience rather than there being no experience. There is experience. And it's just as simple as that. We could say this experience is being done by an artificial intelligence. It's just a matter that there is experience rather than no experience. So it's like if you turn on the TV, the TV is on. It doesn't matter who's watching it. It's just there. There is something on rather than nothing. So now let's apply this to the real world, your actual life. So if you were to die right now and you completely cease to exist, there wouldn't be a black void or eternal oblivion or nothingness. Instead, if you cease to exist, you have to ask yourself, will there be experience after I die? Intuitively, we say no, there won't be experience after I die. But that's because you're still thinking about yourself. After you die, let go of yourself. And then ask, will there be experience after I die? Yes, there will be experience after you die. It will be being done by other brains. Other brains will be responsible for consciousness, subjective conscious experience after you die. So yes, there will be experience after you die, as opposed to no experience. There isn't going to be any lack of experience after you die. So that's called generic subjective continuity. There is no you that transfers into these other brains or anything like that. You're completely gone. You cease to exist, but yet there is experience after you've died. It's just being done by other brains. So now let's ask, if you were never born, would there be experience? Well, you can probably guess what I'm going to say next. Yes, because other brains were doing experience before you were born. And had you never been born, other brains would still be doing experience. And so whether or not you were born makes no difference as far as there being experience. So let's say that, back to the empty universe idea, and let's say that your parents are the only two that exist, but then they give birth to you. And so your experience came after your non-existence. But let's say they gave birth to somebody else. Does that mean you'd be in a black void? No. It'd mean instead of your brain being the one that imposed experience, it'd be that other brain being the one that imposed experience. There wouldn't be no experience of nothingness. There wouldn't be a perpetual non-experience. As long as there is experience, there is experience. And only experience is what's experienced. And when I say only experience, the first experience in that sentence is a noun, and then the second experience in that sentence is verb. So only experience is what is experienced. There is no escape from experience. You can see this if you've ever gone unconscious from anesthesia or something like that, or a hit to the head, whatever. You don't experience your lack of consciousness. From your perspective, that period of time that you're unconscious is skipped over. It's as if you went through a time machine. It's 2 o'clock, then you go unconscious, and next thing you know, it's 3 o'clock. It's a proverbial time machine. So all moments of unconsciousness are skipped over from the point of view of consciousness. And this shows that only experience is what's experienced. Or as Tom Clark put it, consciousness is always present for itself. And so what this means is that if you were never born, then instead of this life, instead of the life that's listening to this right now, it would have been one of the lives that were born, one of the lives that does exist right now. If it isn't one life, it's another. There's no alternative. The asymmetry argument doesn't offer anything. It has nothing to offer, and that's why I say it's a deity. It's a form. It could be called a snake oil. It doesn't offer anything, and only if it offers something can it be worth basing anything on. Sorry. So it provides it doesn't provide anything. And there would have to be, the asymmetry argument would have to offer something in order to make sense. It would have to offer a perpetual state of nothingness, or a perpetual state of neutrality that just doesn't end. But what happened last time you didn't exist? It was ended by what? It was ended by a mere birth of a biological body. So that's all it takes to end non-existence, or whatever you want to call it, is the birth of a biological body. So back to my first thought experiment, there's, the empty universe, but then a biological body with a brain that functions comes to exist, and so bam, there it is. There's conscious experience, and that body doesn't have to be the one that's listening to this right now. It could have been any body. That it's almost like a film projector. It doesn't matter which projector it is that's projecting the image. All that matters is the image is there, and I'm not saying that consciousness is being projected from your brain or anything like that. I'm just using the projector as a metaphor to explain that brains do consciousness. They're what's responsible for consciousness. So what this means is, if you weren't born, then it is completely possible that instead of this life, it would have been, say, the life of being I often use the example of a chicken in a factory farm, or some other animal anywhere in the world or in the universe. Just any random sentient being anywhere in the universe. Another person, a rich person, a poor person, all of the endless variations of life throughout the universe, whatever they may be. AI is also included. And we can imagine all sorts of things, like lifestyles of very rich people and very poor people, hellish lifestyles, great lifestyles, and everything in between. So if you weren't born, then it would have been one of those other lives instead of this life. There's no escape. There's no nothingness to be had. There isn't an eternal peaceful oblivion to be had. And so after you die, the same applies. If it isn't this life, then it's going to be some other life. If it isn't one thing, it's another, really. If it isn't one experience, then it's another. Just like in your daily life, we know this. If you're not experiencing one thing, then you're experiencing another thing. And so this is why it's much worse than antinatalists realize. So if this is true, if naturalism is true, if brains really are responsible for consciousness, then after we die, the being not me being an elephant in the Sahara, or the African plains, or wherever, a camel in the Sahara, it won't be me. It's just simply that brain there is responsible for consciousness. And so there is conscious experience after I die. And so that could be the experience that comes after this one for me, or a frog, or an alien somewhere, or we can imagine such horrible things. And we know that there's much worse things. There's the amount of bad in the universe is just insurmountable compared to the good lives. So, and what can we do about this? Well, all we can really do is try to make the best of everything. But then again, we don't know the repercussions of our actions. We don't know the long-term effects. We can try to do something good, and it just ends up having a worse effect in the long run. So, and well, you might be thinking, well, the heat death of the universe will fix all this. But even then, we won't get to experience this sigh of relief, or this, oh, finally, it's over. We get to have peace now. No, there is no peace to be had. It would just be, it wouldn't be anything, but it would be skipped over until eventually consciousness starts again somewhere else. Until consciousness comes along again. And many, like we just recently, scientists come to the conclusion that the universe is much older than we thought it was. It's not almost 15 billion years old. It turns out it's around 27 billion years old. This is something that was just discovered recently, or at least they believe that this is highly likely. And there's so many things we're discovering all the time we got wrong in the past. And many scientists believe in the big, or some variation of the Big Bounce, a Big Bounce, or the multiverse. If our universe goes, well, guess what? There's endless other universes out there, and each one definitely contains life. And in infinity, there's definitely life out there. And so it just never ends. It just keeps going. Even if it does end, then that takes us back to this state it was originally. And what happened after that state? Well, if there's nothingness as far as the universe is concerned, well, that was followed by what? This universe. And so if it ends again, then that's a return to that state, and that state did nothing to stop this universe from coming to exist. So why would it stop another one from coming to exist? And so it just never ends. And so I'm pretty stoic about it, but at the same time, I really hope generic subjective continuity is not true. I really hope not. I'd rather there be some kind of eternal supernatural afterlife, or something else that we're not seeing. I think it'd be much worse to be in a black void for eternity. Ugh, that'd be horrible. I would much rather be surrounded by, life itself, or subjective experience. You don't experience peace while you're unconscious sleeping at night. It's, from your point of view, it's skipped over, you know? And if you died at night in your sleep, you would just disappear if naturalism is true. You'd just be gone. And the last time you didn't exist, what was it followed by? It was followed by a life. And will there be lives after you die? Yes, there will be lives after you die. There will be people existing, and there will be animals and people born after you die. So yes, there will be life after death, not a supernatural afterlife, but like literal life after death. There will literally be lives after you die. Kind of like a video game. It's like, you know, Mario died, but oh, look at that, there comes a new life. You know, only this time it's not Mario, it's somebody else. You know, it's like you have, the universe just provides endless characters that come play the game after you die. It just keeps going. The game never ends. So, but like I said, hopefully there's something we're not aware of that is better than generic subjective continuity. But yeah, if Benatar's worldview is true, he's a naturalist, and you know, if like Sam Harris's worldview is true, if naturalism is true, then this is what it is. This is it. Here, you, me, everything, everyone, everybody, the universe, this is it. There is no other place. There is no relaxation. There's no sigh of relief. So this is worse than antinatalists realize.